When fear becomes the key, Kierkegaard's hidden philosophy of inner liberation. Picture yourself standing at the edge of an infinite abyss. Not a physical cliff, but something far more terrifying. The vast expanse of your own possibilities. Your heart pounds, your breath shortens, your mind races with 1,000 what-ifs. This isn't fear of something specific. This is something deeper, more primal. This is the raw confrontation with your own freedom, and it feels like it might destroy you. Most people call this anxiety and treat it as an enemy to be defeated. But Søren Kierkegaard, the tormented Danish philosopher who gave birth to existentialism, saw something radically different. He saw anxiety not as a prison, but as the key to the deepest liberation a human being can achieve. Today we'll explore why your fear might actually be your freedom in disguise, and how Kierkegaard's revolutionary insight can transform your relationship with the very feeling that seems to paralyze you. Søren Kierkegaard lived his philosophy in the most visceral way possible. Born in Copenhagen in 1813, he was a man haunted by anxiety from his earliest days. His father, a deeply religious but melancholic merchant, filled the household with guilt and existential dread. Kierkegaard inherited not just his father's money, but his psychological torment. He was a brilliant student, a sharp wit, a man who could charm any social gathering. Yet beneath his sophisticated exterior, he wrestled with a profound anguish that would shape one of history's most penetrating philosophies of human existence. Kierkegaard's breakthrough came from a simple but revolutionary observation. There's a fundamental difference between fear and anxiety. Fear has an object. You fear the approaching storm, the angry dog, the loss of your job. Fear is rational, directed, manageable. But anxiety is something entirely different. Anxiety emerges from nothingness, from the sheer fact of your own existence as a free being. In his masterwork, The Concept of Anxiety, Kierkegaard wrote that anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. Think about that phrase, the dizziness of freedom. You're not anxious because something terrible is happening to you. You're anxious because something extraordinary is always possible for you. This insight demolishes everything we typically think about anxiety. We treat it as pathology, as weakness, as something to be eliminated through medication or therapy. But Kierkegaard suggests that anxiety might actually be the most important signal our psyche can send us. It's not telling us we're sick, it's telling us we're free. Every moment of anxiety is your consciousness recognizing that you could choose differently, act differently, become different than you are right now. The student staring at a blank page isn't just afraid of failure, they're dizzy with the infinite possibilities of what they could write. The person considering leaving their job isn't just worried about security, they're overwhelmed by the recognition that their life could take countless different directions. But Kierkegaard understood something else crucial about anxiety. It reveals the precarious nature of human existence. Unlike animals who live according to instinct, or objects, which simply exist according to physical laws, human beings exist in a state of constant becoming. We are never finished, never complete, never safely defined. At every moment, we're suspended between what we have been and what we might become. This suspension is what creates the dizzying sensation Kierkegaard identified. We experience anxiety because we're always standing at the edge of transformation, always aware that the next choice could fundamentally alter who we are. This leads to what Kierkegaard saw as the central human predicament. We desperately want freedom, but we're terrified of it. Freedom is not just the ability to choose between options. It's the weight of ultimate responsibility for who you become. Most people, Kierkegaard observed, cannot bear this weight. They flee from freedom into what he called the crowd. Conformity, conventional wisdom, social expectations, anything that relieves them of the burden of choosing their own existence. They trade authenticity for security, selfhood for belonging, the terrible freedom of becoming themselves for the comfortable prison of being like everyone else. But here's where Kierkegaard's philosophy becomes truly radical. He argued that this flight from freedom is the root of human despair. In The Sickness Unto Death, he described despair as the fundamental human ailment, not sadness or depression, but the deeper sickness of not being yourself. Most people, he claimed, live in despair without even knowing it. They've become so disconnected from their authentic self that they mistake conformity for contentment, routine for peace. They've numbed the anxiety that might have guided them toward genuine selfhood. Kierkegaard's own life exemplified this struggle. He was engaged to Regina Olsen, a woman he loved deeply, but he broke off the engagement because he feared that marriage would trap him in conventional existence. He chose the anguish of solitude over the comfort of social acceptance. He was a Christian in a Christian society, but he attacked the Danish state church for turning faith into mere respectability. He chose the difficult path of authentic faith over the easy path of religious conformity. Every choice was made in anxiety, with no guarantee of the outcome, guided only by his commitment to becoming himself rather than what others expected him to be. This brings us to one of Kierkegaard's most profound insights: the relationship between anxiety and authenticity. You cannot become your authentic self without experiencing anxiety, because authenticity requires you to venture beyond the safe boundaries of social expectation into the uncharted territory of your own unique existence. Anxiety is not an obstacle to authenticity. It's the very condition that makes authenticity possible. When you feel that familiar churning in your stomach, that racing of your heart, that paralysis of overwhelming possibility, you're not experiencing a malfunction. You're experiencing the birth pangs of your authentic self trying to emerge. But Kierkegaard also understood that anxiety can be paralyzing. Standing before infinite possibility can leave us unable to choose anything at all. This is why he emphasized the necessity of what he called the leap of faith. Not blind religious belief, but the courage to act without certainty, to choose without knowing all the consequences, to become yourself without a guarantee that the self you become will be successful or accepted or even happy. The leap of faith is the moment when you decide that becoming authentic is more important than staying safe. Modern psychology has largely confirmed Kierkegaard's insights, though it rarely gives him credit. What we now call existential anxiety, anxiety about meaning, death, freedom, and isolation, is increasingly recognized as different from clinical anxiety disorders. Existential anxiety often signals that someone is on the verge of psychological growth, that they're confronting fundamental questions about how to live rather than simply trying to manage symptoms. Many therapists now work with anxiety, not by trying to eliminate it, but by helping clients understand what it might be telling them about their need for authenticity, meaning, or change. Kierkegaard would not be surprised by our current epidemic of anxiety. We live in a culture that offers us infinite choices, but little guidance about how to choose. Social media confronts us daily with evidence of countless different ways to live, work, love, and be. We're overwhelmed not by scarcity, but by possibility. Traditional sources of meaning, religion, family, community, have weakened without being replaced by anything equally substantial. We're freer than any generation in human history and more anxious. Kierkegaard predicted this. He saw that as human freedom increased, so would human anxiety, because anxiety is freedom's shadow. But he also saw that this anxiety could be transformed from burden into gift. The key is learning to read anxiety correctly, not as a sign that something is wrong with you, but as a sign that something is right with you. Your anxiety might be telling you that you're living someone else's life instead of your own. It might be signaling that you're making choices based on fear rather than authenticity. It might be urging you toward a change you've been avoiding, a truth you've been denying, a version of yourself you've been afraid to become. Kierkegaard developed what he called stages of existence, different ways of living that represent different relationships to anxiety and freedom. The aesthetic stage is characterized by the pursuit of immediate pleasure and the avoidance of boredom. The ethical stage involves commitment to moral principles and social responsibility. The religious stage transcends both in a direct, personal relationship with the absolute. But progression through these stages isn't automatic or comfortable. Each transition requires a leap through anxiety into a new way of being. The practical implications of Kierkegaard's philosophy are profound. Instead of trying to eliminate anxiety, we might learn to dialogue with it. What is your anxiety trying to tell you about the gap between who you are and who you might become? Instead of fleeing into distraction when anxiety arises, we might practice sitting with it, breathing through it, listening to its message. Instead of making choices based on what will minimize anxiety, we might consider what choices would honor our authentic self even if they increase anxiety in the short term. This doesn't mean glorifying anxiety or seeking it out unnecessarily. Kierkegaard understood that anxiety can be overwhelming, even destructive, but he distinguished between productive anxiety, anxiety that signals growth and calls us toward authenticity, and neurotic anxiety that simply circles on itself without leading anywhere. The difference lies in whether the anxiety is connected to genuine possibility and choice, or whether it's become a habit of mind that prevents rather than enables action. Kierkegaard also emphasized the social dimension of anxiety and authenticity. We don't become ourselves in isolation, but in relationship, not by conforming to others' expectations, but by learning to be genuinely present with others as our authentic selves. This requires what he called fear and trembling, the anxiety of taking responsibility for our impact on others while refusing to sacrifice our authenticity to their approval. It's the difficult path between selfishness and self-abandonment. One of Kierkegaard's most challenging insights is that anxiety never fully disappears for someone committed to authentic existence. Each new stage of life, each major choice, each deepening of self-understanding brings new anxiety because it opens up new possibilities for becoming. The goal isn't to reach a state where anxiety is eliminated, but to develop what he called the courage to be, the ongoing willingness to face anxiety as the price of freedom. This perspective radically reframes what it means to live well. Instead of seeking comfort, security, and the elimination of difficult feelings, Kierkegaard suggests we might seek authenticity, meaning, and the courage to face difficulty in service of becoming ourselves. Instead of asking, "How can I feel less anxious?" we might ask, "What is my anxiety calling me toward?" Instead of viewing anxiety as evidence of weakness or pathology, we might view it as evidence of our capacity for growth, change, and freedom. The implications extend beyond individual psychology to how we structure society itself. A culture that views anxiety purely as pathology will tend to create institutions designed to minimize anxiety rather than support authentic development. Schools will focus on compliance rather than creativity. Workplaces will emphasize predictability rather than innovation. Communities will prize conformity rather than diversity. But a culture that understands anxiety as potentially pointing toward freedom and authenticity might create very different kinds of institutions, ones that support people in the difficult work of becoming themselves. Kierkegaard's final insight may be the most important. The journey toward authenticity is not a destination, but a way of traveling. You don't arrive at a point where you've fully become yourself and can rest. Becoming yourself is an ongoing process that requires constant vigilance, constant choice, constant willingness to face the anxiety of freedom. Each day presents new opportunities to choose authenticity over conformity, growth over comfort, truth over convenience. Each day, anxiety might arise to signal these opportunities. So when you next feel that familiar tightness in your chest, that racing of your heart, that overwhelming sense of possibility and uncertainty, remember Kierkegaard's insight. This is not your enemy attacking you. This is your freedom calling to you. This is your authentic self trying to emerge. This is your opportunity to choose who you become, rather than simply accepting who you've been. The dizziness of freedom is not comfortable, but it's the only path to becoming genuinely yourself. Kierkegaard once wrote, "The most painful state of being is remembering the future, particularly the one you'll never have. Your anxiety might be your psyche's way of preventing exactly that kind of regret, by alerting you now to possibilities you might otherwise let slip away, to authentic choices you might otherwise avoid, to the self you might otherwise never become. In this light, anxiety transforms from curse to gift, from enemy to guide, from prison to key. And perhaps that transformation is itself the beginning of the freedom Kierkegaard spent his life exploring. The terrible, beautiful freedom of becoming yourself.